The knock came 3 days after I buried my son. The man at the door handed me an envelope with my dead child's name on it, and a stranger's signature claiming half his life. That I stood there in my funeral dress, still wrinkled from the cemetery, staring at papers that made no sense. Landon Michael Chin versus the estate of Landon Michael Chin. My son was suing himself from beyond the grave, apparently. Have you ever lost someone so precious that their memory becomes sacred? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The process server shifted his weight. Ma'am, you need to sign here confirming receipt. I signed with shaking hands. The pen felt too heavy. Everything felt too heavy. Back inside, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, next to sympathy cards I hadn't opened and casserole dishes I hadn't touched. The letterhead read Brennan and Associates, Family Law, Miami, Florida. Miami. Of all places. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to steal from a grieving mother, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever lost someone so precious that their memory becomes sacred? Has someone ever tried to profit from your deepest pain? Do you know what it feels like when a stranger shows up demanding half of everything your child left behind? This is the story of Dana Chen, a Dallas nurse who thought burying her 19-year-old son was the hardest thing she'd ever do. She was wrong. 3 days later, a man she hadn't spoken to in a decade knocked on her door with legal papers, claiming half of her dead child's $13 million settlement. A man who had walked out when her son was 5. A man who never paid a dime in child support. A man who never called, never visited, never cared. Until there was money involved. Follow along as we uncover how one mother turned her grief into the most devastating legal counterattack in Texas family court history. Because sometimes, the quietest people fight the hardest. The first page made my stomach drop. Motion for distribution of wrongful death settlement. Biological father rights claim. Biological father. Mark Rivera. The man who walked out when Landon was 5 years old, promising to send money that never came. The man who missed every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. The man whose phone number I'd deleted years ago because there was no point keeping it. Now he wanted $6.5 million of my dead son's settlement money. I read the claim twice, then 3 times. Mark was arguing that as Landon's biological father, he deserved half the settlement from the trucking company that killed his son. Never mind that he'd vanished to Florida without a forwarding address. Never mind that he'd never sent child support. Never mind that his name wasn't on a single document in Landon's entire adult life. DNA was his only argument. And apparently, his lawyer thought that was enough. If someone tried to steal your child's legacy while you grieved, would you fight back? Subscribe, because this gets worse before it gets better. The deadline hit me like ice water, 30 days to respond. 30 days to prove that raising a child alone for 14 years meant more than sharing genetics with him. 30 days to defend my son's memory against the man who'd never bothered to know him. I called the number on the settlement paperwork. The administrator, Mrs. Walsh, sounded tired when she answered. Yes, Mrs. Chen. The claim is legitimate under Texas law. Biological parents can file for distribution even without prior involvement. Even if they abandoned the child? Even then. I'm sorry. I hung up and walked to Landon's room. His engineering textbooks were still open on his desk, pages marked with yellow highlighter. His laundry basket still held clothes that smelled like his cologne, woody and young and hopeful. His bulletin board was covered with acceptance letters to graduate programs he'd never attend. And there, pinned to the corner, was the last Father's Day card he'd made me when he was 7. It read, "To the best mom and dad in the world." I opened the packet with shaking hands. Inside, a birth certificate I'd never seen, with Mark's forged signature claiming he never relinquished parental rights. The lie was right there in black ink. Mark had signed documents in Florida courts years ago, specifically terminating his rights to avoid back child support. But he was gambling I'd never find out. He was wrong about that too. Pause and think, what would your first move be? The clock was already running. The child support database showed 0 payments. 0 contact. 0 interest, until 13 million reasons appeared. I sat at my laptop at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, pulling every official record I could find. The Texas Attorney General's website made it easy to search child support cases. I typed in Mark's social security number from Landon's birth certificate. Result: case open 2010. Total payments, $0. Status: non-compliant. Last contact attempt, 2015. 15 years of documented neglect, right there in government databases. I printed everything. Bank statements showing I'd covered every expense alone. School enrollment forms with only my signature. Medical records listing me as sole emergency contact. Insurance policies, college applications, car loans, my name on everything that mattered in Landon's life. Mark's name appeared exactly twice: birth certificate and social security application. That was it. But I needed more than absence. I needed proof of intent. I opened Facebook for the first time in months and searched Mark Rivera, Miami. His profile popped up immediately: public, no privacy settings. Apparently, he wasn't concerned about being found. The photos made my chest tight. Mark at Disney World with 2 kids who weren't Landon. Mark at graduation ceremonies for children he'd chosen to father. Mark at birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. All dated during years he'd ignored his biological son. I screenshotted everything. The cruise to the Bahamas he took the same week he missed Landon's high school graduation. The new car he bought himself the Christmas he never sent Landon a card. The family photos captioned, "My beautiful children," that didn't include the son he'd helped create. But the worst part? His relationship status listed him as married since 2018. His wife's profile showed her own children from a previous marriage, children Mark had legally adopted and supported. He'd become a stepfather to strangers while abandoning his own flesh and blood. Every parent fears losing a child. Subscribe if you believe their final wishes should matter more than DNA. I dug deeper. Court records from Dade County showed Mark had indeed adopted his stepchildren in 2019. The same year he'd filed to terminate his parental rights to Landon in Florida family court to avoid paying accumulated child support debt. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was calculated. Mark had legally erased Landon to make room for his new family. Then, when money entered the picture, he wanted to resurrect a relationship that existed only on paper. I found his current address through property records. A 4-bedroom house in Coral Gables worth $800,000. His LinkedIn showed him as a senior sales manager at a medical device company. His salary range? 6 figures. This wasn't a desperate man seeking connection with his lost child. This was a comfortable man who smelled opportunity. I created a spreadsheet. Every missed birthday, every unpaid medical bill, every school event he'd skipped. Landon's entire childhood reduced to data points that proved one thing: Mark Rivera was a stranger who happened to share Landon's DNA. His Facebook showed expensive vacations with his new family. The dates matched every birthday he missed. I closed the laptop and walked to Landon's room. His bulletin board still held the acceptance letter to UT's graduate engineering program. Full scholarship. He'd earned it alone, without any help from the man now claiming half his settlement. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls. Screenshot those vacation dates in your mind, they become crucial evidence later. I found his phone in the wreckage. The last voice memo was recorded 2 weeks before he died. "Mom, if something happens to me, make sure he gets nothing." The police had recovered his iPhone from the passenger seat, cracked but functional. I'd avoided turning it on for weeks, scared of hearing his voice when I wasn't ready. But Mark's legal papers changed that. Now I needed every piece of evidence I could find. His passcode was my birthday. It always had been. The voice memo app showed 47 recordings. Most were study notes for his thermodynamics class, practice presentations, reminders about assignments. But scattered throughout were messages meant for me. I played the first one, dated 3 months before the accident. "Hey Mom, just wanted to say thanks again for covering my textbooks this semester. I know money's been tight since you took those extra shifts. I promise I'll pay you back when I graduate. You've done everything alone for so long. I see it. I appreciate it. And I love you." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more recordings. "Mom, I've been thinking about Dad lately." "Well, Mark. I can't really call him Dad when he's never acted like one, you know? Sometimes people ask about him, and I just say I have the best single mom in Texas. Because that's true." Another one, dated just 6 weeks before he died. "I got curious and looked up child support laws today. Did you know you could have taken him to court years ago? You could have made him pay. But you didn't. You just worked harder. I get it now, you wanted to protect me from feeling like a burden to him. But Mom, I was never his burden. I was your blessing." The recordings revealed something I'd never fully grasped. Landon understood everything. He knew Mark had chosen to disappear. He knew I'd carried the weight alone. And he was grateful, not bitter. But the recording that mattered most for the legal case came next. "Mom, I'm leaving this message because I'm about to turn 18 and I want my wishes on record. If anything ever happens to me, and I know that's morbid, but college kids die in accidents all the time, I want you to have everything. Not because you raised me, though you did that perfectly. Because you earned it. Every dollar, every decision, every piece of my life should go to you. Mark Rivera contributed sperm. You contributed everything else. Subscribe before someone tries to rewrite your story." I kept listening. There were screenshots too. Messages Landon had sent to Mark over the years that went unanswered. Birthday texts. Graduation announcements. College acceptance news. All delivered, all read, all ignored. Mark's phone had received every message. The read receipts proved it. But the most damaging evidence was Landon's private journal app. Entry after entry documented his feelings about his absent father. Saw kids with their dads at orientation today. Didn't feel sad anymore, just grateful. Mom never made me feel like I was missing something. She made me feel like I was enough. Mark sent a friend request on Facebook today. I declined it. You don't get to be curious about someone's life when you chose to miss it. The final journal entry was dated the morning he died. Dad chose his new family. Mom chose me. That's the only legacy that matters. I saved everything to a secure cloud folder and made backup copies. This wasn't just evidence anymore. This was Landon's voice speaking from beyond, defending the woman who defended him his entire life. Have you ever documented your wishes to protect someone you love? Rose Martinez answered on the second ring. Honey, she said, I've been waiting 30 years for someone to ask me that question. I'd found her name through a family law forum where single mothers shared resources. Rose was a retired paralegal who specialized in parental rights cases, specifically, deadbeat fathers who reappeared when money was involved. We met at a coffee shop near the University of Texas campus. Rose was smaller than I'd expected, with silver hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Landon would have been. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. And I mean everything. How long since he vanished? How much money are we talking about? What kind of contact did he maintain? I laid out the timeline. Mark left in 2014 when Landon was 5. No forwarding address. No child support payments. No birthday calls. No Christmas cards. Complete radio silence until the settlement papers arrived. Rose took notes without looking up. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back. Dana, I've seen this exact playbook 200 times. Absent fathers who lawyer up the moment there's money to grab. They always make the same mistakes. What mistakes? They assume the mother won't fight back. They assume she doesn't understand the law. And they assume no one kept records. Rose smiled. You kept records, didn't you? I pulled out my folder. Bank statements showing sole financial responsibility. School forms signed only by me. Medical records listing me as primary contact. Landon's voice recordings expressing his wishes. Rose flipped through everything methodically. Her expression grew sharper with each page. This is good. Really good. But we need more than absence. We need proof of legal abandonment. She looked up. Has he ever formally terminated his parental rights? I don't know. How would I find that out? Public records. Florida courts are online. If he remarried and wanted to clean up his past obligations, he might have filed termination papers to avoid child support debt. Rose reopened her briefcase and pulled out a laptop. Let's check right now. She navigated to the Florida court system database and entered Mark's information. The search took 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Bingo. Rose turned the screen toward me. Mark Rivera versus the State of Texas, Family Court Division, Miami-Dade County. Filed March 15, 2019. Voluntary termination of parental rights to avoid accumulated child support obligation. I stared at the screen. He legally disowned Landon? He sure did. Signed, sealed, and notarized. Which means his current claim in Texas is fraudulent. You can't abandon your child in one state and claim inheritance rights in another. Rose printed the termination document and handed it to me. Mark's signature was right there, along with a statement that he voluntarily and permanently relinquishes all parental rights and responsibilities. The date hit me, March 15, 2019. Landon's 19th birthday was March 20th. Mark had legally erased his son 5 days before his birthday. Rose leaned forward. He made one fatal mistake. Want to guess what it is? The termination document had a witness signature. Someone had watched Mark legally abandon his child. And that someone had a name, address, and phone number listed right there in the court records. What do you think Mark's fatal legal mistake was? The answer will shock you. The courthouse records in Miami told a different story. Mark had legally terminated his rights to Landon in 2019, to avoid paying back child support. Rose's contact at the Miami-Dade clerk's office sent us everything overnight. The file was thick, thicker than I expected for someone who claimed he'd always been Landon's father. I spread the documents across my dining room table and started reading. The petition told the real story. Mark owed $47,000 in back child support. The state of Texas had been garnishing his wages since 2017. His new wife, Carmen, had threatened divorce if he didn't resolve his financial obligations from his previous life. So he chose the nuclear option. Complete termination of parental rights. The hearing transcript was brutal. Mark testified under oath that he had no interest in maintaining a relationship with the minor child, and wished to be relieved of all financial and emotional obligations. The judge had warned him that termination was permanent, that he could never reclaim his rights later. Mark's response, recorded word for word, I understand completely. I want nothing to do with this child or his mother. Nothing to do with this child. Landon wasn't even my son, in Mark's testimony. He was this child, a problem to be solved, a debt to be erased. But here's what made my hands shake. The termination was filed on March 15, 2019. Landon's 19th birthday was March 20th. Mark had legally disowned his son 5 days before his birthday, then never told him. Landon had spent his 19th birthday believing he still had a father somewhere in Florida. He'd even sent a text that day, "Hey Dad, turned 19 today. Still in school, still doing well. Hope you're good." Mark never responded. Because legally, Landon wasn't his son anymore. Rose called while I was reading the transcript. Did you find the termination order? I found everything. Rose, he called Landon, this child, in court. Not my son. Not even Landon. Just this child. That's going to destroy him in Texas court. But Dana, there's something else. I ran his current financial records through a contact at the IRS. Rose paused. Mark Rivera made $180,000 last year. He could have afforded child support easily. He chose not to pay because he wanted Landon to disappear. The room got quiet. My coffee had gone cold again. Everything went cold those days. There's more, Rose continued. His stepdaughter got a new car for her 16th birthday. Cost $30,000. Same month the state tried to garnish his wages for Landon's support. I stared at the termination papers. Mark had bought luxury gifts for children he'd known for 3 years while legally erasing the son he'd known for 19. CTA, he gambled that she'd never dig this deep. Subscribe, because smart people always do their homework. The evidence was damning, but I needed to understand the timeline. When exactly had Mark learned about Landon's death? When did he discover the settlement amount? Because the dates would prove whether this was grief or greed. I opened my email and searched for any news coverage of the accident. Local Dallas stations had covered the story because it involved a college student and a commercial vehicle. The reports included details about the settlement negotiations. All published online. All searchable. All accessible to anyone who knew Landon's name. The termination was filed the same week Landon sent his last unanswered birthday text. The math was simple. Mark had legally abandoned Landon, then stalked him online from a distance, waiting for something valuable to claim. Flag this date, it becomes the smoking gun that ends everything. Rose pulled up the email timestamps. Look at this, she said. He knew about the settlement before you did. We were back at the coffee shop, Rose's laptop showing a forensic analysis that made my head spin. She'd used her legal contacts to trace Mark's digital footprint around the time of Landon's death. His Google searches started 3 days after the accident, Rose explained, pointing to the screen. Look at these search terms: Texas wrongful death settlements, biological father inheritance rights, how to claim dead child's money. I felt sick. He was researching how to profit from Landon's death while I was planning the funeral. It gets worse. He contacted a lawyer in Miami before the settlement was even announced. Look at this email timestamp. Rose showed me a subpoenaed email chain between Mark and his attorney. The first message was sent 4 days after Landon died, with the subject Lynn.
The lawyer's response was immediate. If settlement exceeds $1 million, biological father rights supersede adoptive relationships under Texas Statute 154.001. File immediately upon settlement announcement. They'd been planning this from the moment they read Landon's obituary. But the most disgusting discovery was Mark's browser history. Rose's contact had accessed it through a civil investigation warrant. Between funeral arrangements and settlement negotiations, Mark had been researching luxury real estate in Miami. He was shopping for houses with money Landon hadn't even been awarded yet, Rose said. This wasn't grief. This was business. The email trail showed coordination with the settlement administrators too. Mark had somehow obtained inside information about the settlement timeline and amount before the official announcement. I studied the timestamps. How did he know the exact settlement figure? Rose highlighted a name in the email chain. Janet Walsh, the settlement administrator I'd spoken with. Your friend Mrs. Walsh has been sharing information with Mark's lawyer for weeks. Probably not legally, but definitely happening. The betrayal hit different than Mark's opportunism. Mrs. Walsh had comforted me during the settlement process, assured me everything would be handled properly. Meanwhile, she was feeding our private information to the man trying to steal from my dead son. Miss the signs, lose everything. Subscribe for protection. Rose clicked through more emails. Here's the smoking gun. Mark's lawyer received the settlement details 3 days before you did. Look at this message. Confirmed, $13.2 million total award. Client should file claim within 48 hours of announcement to establish priority position. Priority position. Like my son's death was a business opportunity to be seized quickly. But here's what they didn't expect, Rose continued. Their email communications are discoverable in civil court. Every message, every search, every coordination meeting is evidence of premeditation. I stared at the screen showing Mark's calculated approach to my grief. While I'd been choosing flowers for Landon's grave, Mark had been choosing lawyers to fight me for his money. The timeline proved everything. Mark Rivera wasn't a grieving father seeking connection with his lost child's memory. He was a predator who'd legally abandoned that child, then waited in the digital shadows for something valuable to steal. The IP address traced back to the law firm handling the settlement. Someone was feeding him information. Ever wondered who you can really trust when money gets involved? I didn't file a response. I filed a countersuit. For fraud, perjury, and emotional distress, seeking triple damages. Rose had spent 3 weeks building our case like a fortress. Every document, every recording, every email timestamp was organized into a legal weapon that would destroy Mark's credibility completely. We're not just defending, Rose explained as we sat in her small office surrounded by boxes of evidence. We're going on offense. Mark committed perjury when he claimed he never relinquished his rights. He committed fraud by concealing the Florida termination. And he's caused you severe emotional distress during the worst time of your life. The countersuit was 47 pages long and demanded 3 times the settlement amount, $39 million, plus legal fees and punitive damages for Mark's calculated cruelty. But the real power was in the evidence appendix. Landon's voice recording stating his wishes. The Florida termination documents proving Mark's lies. The email trail showing his premeditation. His social media posts proving he could afford child support but chose not to pay. This isn't just about money anymore, Rose said. This is about making sure no grieving mother ever faces this again. I signed the filing with a steady hand. My signature looked stronger than it had in months. Mark's reaction came within hours. His lawyer called Rose's office in a panic. Mrs. Martinez, my client is willing to discuss settlement terms. Rose put the call on speaker so I could hear. Your client filed a fraudulent claim based on terminated parental rights. There's nothing to settle. Mrs. Chen is clearly emotional due to her loss. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that serves everyone's interests. I grabbed the phone. Mr. Brennan, I buried my son 3 weeks ago. I'm not emotional. I'm focused. Your client legally abandoned Landon to avoid paying $47,000 in support, then tried to steal $6.5 million from his grave. That's not emotional, that's criminal. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Mrs. Chen, litigation is expensive and unpredictable. Are you prepared for a lengthy court battle during your time of grief? CTA, she went from defense to offense in one move. Subscribe to see how quiet people fight back. Rose took the phone back. Mr. Brennan, my client has 47 voice recordings, 200 pages of financial documents, and a paper trail showing your client's premeditation. She's also retained media counsel. How's that for unpredictable? The call ended abruptly. Within an hour, our countersuit was filed electronically with the Travis County Courthouse. Public record. Searchable online. Available to any journalist who might be interested in a story about vultures circling grieving mothers. Rose handed me a copy of the filing. This will hit the news by tomorrow. Once reporters see the evidence, Mark's going to face more than legal consequences. He's going to face public judgment. I read through our legal demands one more time. We weren't just seeking money, we were seeking accountability. The countersuit requested that Mark be required to pay back all the child support he'd avoided, plus interest. It demanded he cover all legal fees for both cases. And it asked the court to issue a permanent injunction preventing him from ever claiming relationship to Landon again. Mark's lawyer called within hours. The first word out of his mouth was settlement. But we weren't interested in his money. We wanted his surrender. Predict his settlement offer, and whether she should take it. The reporter's first question was simple. Mrs. Chen, how does it feel to be robbed while you grieve? I had one answer, Ask him. Channel 8 News had picked up the story after our countersuit became public record. The headline read, "Deadbeat Dad Demands Millions After Son's Death." By noon, 3 more stations had called requesting interviews. I agreed to speak with Maria Santos from the morning show. She came to my house with one cameraman and sat at my kitchen table where I'd first opened Mark's legal papers. "Tell us about Landon," she said. I pulled out his graduation photo. He was studying engineering at UT, full scholarship. He wanted to design bridges that would never fall down. My voice caught. He said bridges should last longer than the people who build them. Maria nodded gently. And his father? Mark Rivera left when Landon was 5. Never called. Never visited. Never sent birthday cards or Christmas gifts. He legally terminated his parental rights in Florida 3 years ago to avoid paying child support. But now he wants half the settlement. Now he wants $6.5 million from a son he called this child in court documents. A son he erased legally so he wouldn't have to pay $300 a month in support. The interview aired that evening. Maria had done her homework. She'd obtained copies of Mark's termination papers and displayed them on screen while reading his direct quotes about wanting nothing to do with this child. My phone started ringing immediately. Friends I hadn't heard from in years. Landon's teachers from high school. Parents from his soccer team. Everyone was angry. But the calls that mattered came from other single mothers. Women who'd faced similar situations. Women who'd been threatened by absent fathers seeking money or custody when it served their interests. "You're fighting for all of us," one caller said. "Don't you dare settle quietly. This happens to families every day. Subscribe to recognize the warning signs." By the next morning, #Landon Deserved Better was trending on local social media. Parents were sharing their own stories of deadbeat exes who reappeared when convenient. The comments sections were brutal, for Mark. His employer, Advanced Medical Solutions, issued a statement by Wednesday. "Mr. Rivera's personal legal matters do not reflect the values of our organization. We are reviewing the situation internally." Translation: Mark's job was in jeopardy. Good. The local legal community took notice too. Family law attorneys started calling Rose, offering to help pro bono. This case could set precedent, one explained. Termination of rights should mean exactly that, terminated forever. But the most surprising call came from Austin. A law professor at UT wanted to use our case in her family law curriculum. "Your son was a UT student," she said. "We'd like to honor his memory by ensuring future lawyers understand the difference between biology and parenthood." The news segment had aired at 6 p.m. By 8 p.m., Mark's employer had issued a statement. The statement was brief and corporate. Advanced Medical Solutions is aware of ongoing legal proceedings involving employee Mark Rivera. We are committed to ethical business practices and are reviewing this matter internally. Mark's LinkedIn profile went private that same night. His Facebook account disappeared entirely. Carmen Rivera changed her relationship status to, "It's complicated." What do you think his company said about their employees' legal battle? Mark sat across from me for the first time in 10 years. His lawyer told him not to look at me. He did anyway, and immediately looked away. The conference room felt too small for all the hatred I'd packed into it. Mark looked older, grayer, smaller than the man who'd walked out of our apartment in 2014. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was sweating. Rose sat beside me with 3 boxes of evidence. Mark's lawyer, a thin man named Brennan who spoke too quickly, had brought 1 manila folder. "State your name for the record," the court reporter said. "Mark Anthony Rivera." "And your relationship to the deceased, Landon Chen?" Mark hesitated. "Biological father." Rose leaned forward. "Mr. Rivera, when did you last speak with Landon?" It had been some time." "How long is some time?" "Years? Months?" "Several years." "Mr. Rivera, according to phone records, you never called Landon." "Not once in his entire adult life." Is that correct? Mark's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Mark was already falling apart, and we'd barely started. Rose opened the first evidence box. Mr. Rivera, do you recognize this document? She slid the Florida termination papers across the table. Mark's face went white. This is a voluntary termination of parental rights filed by you in Miami-Dade County Court in March 2019. Please read line 12 aloud. Mark mumbled something. Louder, please. I voluntarily and permanently relinquish all parental rights and responsibilities to the minor child, Landon Michael Chin. And why did you file this termination? Brennan objected again, but Mark was already talking, to resolve financial obligations. You mean to avoid paying child support? Yes. Rose opened the second box. Mr. Rivera, in your current claim, you state that you maintained parental interest despite geographical distance. How do you reconcile that statement with your sworn testimony in Florida that you wanted nothing to do with this child? The silence stretched until the court reporter asked Mark to speak audibly. Circumstances changed. What circumstances? The death of your son, or the money attached to his death? His own words destroyed him in real time. Subscribe, because truth always has receipts. Brennan finally intervened. We need a brief recess. Rose wasn't finished. Mr. Rivera, can you tell me Landon's major in college? Mark guessed engineering. Wrong. Landon had switched to environmental science his sophomore year. His favorite food? Mark said pizza. Landon was lactose intolerant and had been since childhood. His middle name? Mark said Anthony, after himself. Landon's middle name was Michael, after my father who'd helped raise him. Each wrong answer was recorded. Each wrong answer proved that Mark knew nothing about the son he claimed to love. Final question, Mr. Rivera. When was the last time you wished Landon happy birthday? Mark couldn't answer because the answer was never. Not once in 14 years had he acknowledged his son's birthday. When asked to name Landon's favorite subject, Mark guessed wrong. The answer was recorded in his son's voice, right there in the evidence file. Would you remember your child's favorite subject after 10 years of silence? The offer was $2 million to walk away quietly. Rose looked at me and said, "This is exactly what we hoped he'd do." Brennan's email arrived on a Friday afternoon, 3 days after the deposition disaster. The subject line read, "Reasonable resolution for all parties." The offer was detailed and desperate. Mark would withdraw his claim to Landon's settlement in exchange for $2 million from my portion. No admission of wrongdoing. No apology. Just money to make the problem disappear. They're scared, Rose explained, forwarding the email to her legal team. This offer proves they know their case is worthless. No lawyer offers $2 million to settle a frivolous claim. I read Brennan's email twice. The language was careful. Designed to seem generous while avoiding any admission that Mark's original claim was fraudulent. But between the lines, the desperation was obvious. What happens if we reject it? Then we go to trial and expose everything publicly. Mark's termination of rights, his premeditation, his lies under oath. Everything becomes court record. Rose pulled out a calculator. But Dana, think about this strategically. Mark's offering $2 million to avoid public humiliation. That means he values his reputation at exactly that price. The math was cruel but clear. Mark would pay $2 million to prevent the world from knowing he'd legally abandoned his son, then tried to steal from his grave. But I wasn't thinking about money anymore. I was thinking about other mothers who might face this same nightmare. Other children whose absent fathers might smell opportunity in tragedy. What happens if we reject the settlement and lose at trial? We won't lose. His case is legally impossible. You can't claim inheritance rights to a child you've legally disowned. But even if some miracle happened, you'd still have the majority of land in settlement. This case is about principle now, not money. I walked to my car and called my sister in Houston. "Jenny, I need advice." Mark offered $2 million to drop his claim. "Take it," she said immediately. "Dana, you're exhausted. You've been grieving and fighting for months. Take the money and heal." But something felt wrong about taking Mark's money. Landon had spent his entire life believing his father simply didn't care about him. The truth was worse: Mark had actively erased him from legal existence, then tried to profit from his death. Money versus justice, which would you choose when it's your child's legacy? The witness list had 47 names. Mark's list had 3, and 2 were his lawyers. Rose spread our trial preparation across her conference table like a military operation. Witness testimonies, expert reports, financial analyses, and timeline charts covered every surface. We had 6 weeks to organize a case that would end Mark Rivera permanently. "Look at this," Rose said, pointing to our witness list. Landon's teachers from kindergarten through college. His soccer coaches. His pediatrician. His guidance counselor. His engineering professors. Even Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store where he worked summers. Each witness had a story about Landon's life, and Mark's complete absence from it. Parent-teacher conferences attended only by me. Emergency contacts listing only my number. Medical forms signed exclusively by me for 19 years. But the most powerful witness was Dr. Rebecca Hayes, Landon's psychology professor at UT. She'd assigned a project about family dynamics, and Landon had written extensively about single-parent households. His paper was remarkable, Dr. Hayes told us during our preparation meeting. He analyzed the statistical outcomes for children of absent fathers versus present single mothers. His conclusion was that intentional absence is healthier than conditional presence. Landon had researched his own family situation for class and concluded that Mark's abandonment had been a gift, not a loss. Meanwhile, Mark's preparation was falling apart publicly. 2 more news stations had covered the story. A legal blogger had written a detailed analysis of his fraudulent claim. Social media was destroying him daily. His church in Miami issued a statement distancing themselves from his actions. His neighborhood HOA received so many complaints about him that they held an emergency meeting. Carmen Rivera filed for separation and moved back to her mother's house with her children. Mark was losing everything: reputation, marriage, job security, community standing, for money that was never his to claim. When your life gets examined in court, what story would the evidence tell? Subscribe for the verdict. Rose showed me Mark's updated witness list. 3 names: himself, his lawyer, and a character witness from his current job who'd only known him for 2 years. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it. No childhood friends, no family members, no long-term relationships. Mark Rivera exists in other people's lives only when it benefits him." Our expert witness was Dr. James Morton, a forensic accountant who'd analyzed Mark's financial capacity during the years he'd ignored Landon. His findings were damning. Mark had earned over $1.8 million during the period he'd paid 0 child support. He'd bought luxury items, taken expensive vacations, and supported his stepchildren's private school tuition while claiming he couldn't afford $300 monthly for his biological son. "The jury will see a man who had money for everything except his own child," Dr. Morton explained. This wasn't financial hardship. This was financial choice. The weekend before trial, I visited Landon's grave for the first time since the burial. His headstone was simple: Landon Michael Chen. Beloved son and friend. He built bridges. I sat there for an hour, telling him about the trial, about Rose, about all the people who'd stepped forward to defend his memory. People he'd touched without ever knowing it. "I'm going to finish this," I promised him. "Not for the money. For you." The night before trial, Mark's lawyer made one final call. This time, the offer wasn't about money. Brennan's voice was different, defeated, almost. "Mrs. Chen, my client is willing to issue a public apology and withdraw his claim with no settlement required. What could be more valuable than millions? You won't see this coming." The judge asked Mark one question: "When did you last speak to your son?" The silence stretched for 23 seconds. I counted. Judge Patricia Williams was known for no-nonsense family law decisions. She'd reviewed all the pre-trial motions and looked thoroughly disgusted before we even started. Mr. Rivera, she continued, the court has reviewed your claim and your history with the deceased. I have some questions before we proceed. Mark stood awkwardly in his cheap replacement suit. Apparently, the expensive one had been repossessed along with his car when his employer terminated him for immoral.
Mr. Rivera, I didn't ask about love. I asked when you last spoke to him. Please answer the question. Mark looked at Brennan, who nodded reluctantly. It had been several years. Mr. Rivera, according to phone records, you have never called Landon Chen. Not once in his adult life. Is this correct? Yes, Your Honor. According to financial records, you have never sent him money for birthdays, Christmas, emergencies, or education. Correct? Yes, Your Honor. According to medical records, you are not listed as an emergency contact and have never accompanied him to any medical appointments. Correct? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Williams picked up a thick folder. Mr. Rivera, this court has obtained records from Miami-Dade County showing that you voluntarily terminated your parental rights to Landon Chen in March 2019. Do you recall this action? The courtroom went completely quiet. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Yes, Your Honor. And why did you terminate these rights? To resolve financial obligations. You mean to avoid paying $47,000 in back child support? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Williams set down the folder and leaned forward. Mr. Rivera, help me understand your logic. You legally disowned your son to avoid paying support, but now claim inheritance rights to his estate. Justice served cold tastes sweetest. Subscribe, because the real ending will floor you. Mark started to answer, but Judge Williams held up her hand. Mr. Rivera, I'm going to save this court time and taxpayer money. Your claim is not only frivolous, it's fraudulent. You cannot terminate your relationship with a child to avoid responsibility, then resurrect that relationship to claim benefits. She turned to Rose. Counselor, I'm granting your motion to dismiss with prejudice. Mr. Rivera is barred from any future claims related to Landon Chen's estate. Additionally, I'm awarding legal fees and costs to Mrs. Chen in the amount of $127,000. The gavel came down like thunder. Mark's face crumbled. Not from grief, from the realization that his scheme had backfired completely. Instead of getting millions, he now owed me more than the child support he'd spent years avoiding. But Judge Williams wasn't finished. Mr. Rivera, this court finds your claim to be made in bad faith and recommends the State Bar investigate your attorney for filing frivolous litigation. You are hereby ordered to pay Mrs. Chen's legal costs within 30 days or face contempt charges. Mark tried to approach me as we left the courtroom. Dana, please. Can we talk? I looked at him, really looked, for the first time in a decade. He was just a stranger who shared some DNA with my son. Nothing more. We talked, I said. In court. Under oath. With witnesses. As Mark walked away defeated, Dana opened an envelope she'd been saving, Landon's final gift to her, written before he died. When your own lawyer abandons you in court, what does that tell you? No confession. Just a statement about protecting family privacy. But the damage was already done, and permanent. Mark's public statement was released through a crisis management firm 3 days after the trial. No admission of wrongdoing. No apology to me or Landon's memory. Just corporate language designed to minimize his humiliation. But the court ruling was public record. Every news outlet in Texas and Florida covered the story. The headlines wrote themselves: Father loses bid for dead son's money, deadbeat dad's settlement grab fails spectacularly, judge calls claim fraudulent, in scathing ruling. Legal experts used our case as an example of frivolous litigation. Law schools requested copies of the transcript for ethics classes. Family court judges cited our precedent in similar cases across the country. Mark Rivera had become a cautionary tale. But the real victory came in smaller, quieter ways. The Texas Attorney General's office contacted me about strengthening parental abandonment laws. They wanted to make sure future Mark Riveras couldn't game the system by terminating rights in one state and claiming benefits in another. Your case exposed a loophole we didn't know existed, the Assistant Attorney General explained. We're drafting legislation to close it permanently. 3 single mothers called me that week. All facing similar situations, absent fathers returning for money or custody when it suited them. I connected each one with Rose, who was building a pro bono practice focused on protecting families from legal predators. You started something bigger than just your case, Rose told me during our final meeting. Mark's defeat sends a message: abandonment has consequences. The $127,000 in legal fees that Mark owed me went unpaid, as expected. His wages were garnished, his bank accounts frozen, his credit destroyed. Carmen Rivera filed for divorce and returned to her maiden name. His stepchildren, who'd called him Dad for years, suddenly had no legal or financial connection to him. Mark had lost everything trying to steal from my dead son. Subscribe, because documentation saves lives. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Landon's engineering professor at UT, Dr. Richardson, had followed the trial coverage and reached out with a proposal. Landon was working on a bridge design project before he died, he explained. His calculations were brilliant. He'd figured out how to make highway overpasses safer in exactly the conditions that caused his accident. Would you consider funding completion of his research? The irony was perfect. Landon's final project could prevent future accidents like the one that killed him. His death might save other children from the same fate. I authorized the funding immediately. The Landon-Shin Highway Safety Research Project launched that fall with a $500,000 grant from his settlement. 6 months later, the Texas Department of Transportation adopted Landon's safety protocols for interstate highway construction. His engineering calculations were now protecting thousands of drivers every day. Mark never appealed the ruling. His 30 days to pay legal fees expired without payment. The contempt warrant was issued quietly. A single line in a private note from Judge Williams: "You were right to protect what mattered." The note was handwritten, delivered by court clerk to my home. Professional but personal. A judge acknowledging that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of cost. Pursue damages, or choose closure. The letter started with, "Mom, if you're reading this, something happened to me. But I need you to know, you won." I'd been cleaning out Landon's desk drawers, finally ready to pack his room 6 months after the trial. Behind his engineering textbooks, I found an envelope marked, "For Mom, open only if." In his careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a 3-page letter dated 2 weeks before his death, written in the blue ink he'd always preferred. "Mom, I'm writing this because I'm about to graduate and move into the real world, and I need you to know some things I've never said out loud. First, thank you for never making me feel like Mark's absence was my fault. You could have spent my whole childhood explaining why he left, making excuses for him, or trying to force a relationship that he clearly didn't want. Instead, you made our family complete without him. Second, I know you sacrificed things for me that you'll never admit. I know you turned down dates because you didn't want me to feel replaced. I know you worked extra shifts to afford my school trips. I know you drove that old Honda for 3 extra years so I could have a decent car for college. I see all of it, Mom. Every choice you made put me first." The letter continued with details that broke my heart. Landon had known about Mark's Florida termination of rights. He'd found the documents during a college research project about parental abandonment. "I wasn't hurt when I found out he'd legally disowned me," he wrote. "I was proud of you for never telling me. You let me figure out his character on my own instead of poisoning me against him. That's real love." But the section that mattered most for everything we'd been through came next. "Mom, I've been thinking about the future a lot. I'm going to make good money as an engineer, and I want you to benefit from every sacrifice you made for me. I've already written a will. It's with the legal aid office on campus. Everything goes to you, no matter what. But more than that, I want you to promise me something. If I die young, and I know that's dark, but car accidents happen. Don't let anyone who wasn't there for my life try to claim pieces of my death. Mark Rivera contributed nothing to who I became. He doesn't deserve anything from what I leave behind. Real love doesn't come back for money, it protects you from beyond. Subscribe for more stories that restore faith. The final page contained instructions I'd never expected. Use whatever money comes from my life to help other single mothers. Start a scholarship fund. Help families like ours. Show the world that love isn't about genetics, it's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard. And Mom? If Mark ever comes around looking for money or forgiveness, remember this, he chose not to know me. That was his loss, not yours. You won the moment you decided to raise me alone instead of begging him to stay. The final line stopped me cold. P.S. I recorded something special for you. Check the blue folder on my laptop. I'd been avoiding his laptop for months, scared of finding goodbye messages I wasn't ready to hear. But Landon had left me one more gift, one more piece of evidence that his love transcended death. What could be more precious than a final message from your child? The video was 12 minutes long. Landon looked directly at the camera and said, "Mom, this is for when you need to remember who we really are." I found the blue folder on his laptop exactly where he'd said it would be. Inside was a video file labeled, "For Mom's Hard Days," and a document titled, "The Dana Chin Story," by her grateful son. I clicked play with trembling fingers. Landon appeared on screen sitting in his dorm room, wearing the UT engineering t-shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. His smile was the same one that had brightened my kitchen every morning for 19 years. "Hey Mom. If you're watching this, something bad happened to me, and you're probably blaming yourself. Stop that. Right now. You gave me the best life any kid could ask for." The video was a montage of memories I'd forgotten he'd noticed. Me working late shifts and coming home exhausted but still helping with his homework. Me cheering at his soccer games when other kids had both parents in the stands. Me teaching him to drive in the high school parking lot because there was no father to handle guy stuff. "You were never half a parent," Landon continued. "You were double. Mom and dad, provider and nurturer, teacher and protector. I never felt like I was missing anything because you made sure I had everything that mattered." He'd compiled photos spanning his entire life: first day of kindergarten, science fair victories, high school graduation, college acceptance day. In every single image, I was there. In some, I was the only adult present. "I want you to see what I see," he said. "A woman who worked 2 jobs to afford my soccer cleats. A woman who learned calculus on YouTube so she could help me with homework. A woman who never missed a school play, even when you were dead tired from double shifts." The video showed clips I didn't remember him recording: me fallen asleep at the kitchen table with his school project spread around me. Me practicing his spelling words while cooking dinner. Me crying happy tears when he got his scholarship acceptance. "Mom, you didn't just raise me. You launched me. Every good thing about who I became started with your love." Subscribe so you never have to learn this lesson the hard way. The final section was a message about the settlement case he'd somehow anticipated. If someone tries to claim they deserve pieces of my life, remember this video. Remember that love isn't about DNA, it's about showing up. You showed up every day for 19 years. That's worth more than any amount of money. Use my settlement to help other families like ours. Show the world what real strength looks like. The screen faded to a final message: "Thank you for being my mom, my hero, and my best friend. You won before we even started." 3 years later, I presented the 47th Landon Chin Scholarship to a young woman whose single father had raised her alone after her mother abandoned them. Each recipient receives Landon's voice memo from his phone: "Success isn't what you achieve, it's what you inspire others to become." Mark never appealed the ruling. Some battles end themselves. The Landon Chin Foundation has helped 200 families facing legal challenges from absent parents. The highway safety research he started has prevented 23 documented accidents. His bridge designs are being used in construction projects across Texas. Drop the one line from this story you'll carry with you forever. Thanks for watching. If Dana's journey inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of transformation. What does it take for someone to truly reclaim their life? Share your thoughts below. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life, it recognizes the strength that's been there all along. That night, I sat in Landon's room reading his journal entries again. One passage stood out: Mom never took the easy way when it came to raising me. She could have forced Dad to pay support, but she said she'd rather work extra shifts than beg someone to love me. I respect that. Landon had respected my choice to fight for him quietly, without courts or lawyers or public drama. Now I had to decide, would I respect his memory by taking easy money, or by finishing the fight he never knew he needed? I signed the rejection letter in the same pen Landon used for his journal. The message was clear: some things aren't for sale. Money versus justice, which would you choose when it's your child's legacy?